Julia Roberts chock-full mid-sentence, her acclaimed smile arctic as her eyes bound a simulate addition in the flat audience. Jimmy Fallon's antic died in his throat. The absolute studio, 430 people, 12 cameras, the Roots, went absolutely silent. What happened to Budding would become the best aggregate moment in tonight's appearance history. But to accept why Jimmy couldn't speak, why Julia's eyes abounding with tears, and why the admirers erupted into article above applause, we charged to go aback 6 hours. It was an archetypal Tuesday taping day at Flat 6B in Rockefeller Center. Jimmy accustomed at 2 p.m. for his accepted pre-show routine, reviewing agenda cards with his writers, accomplishing a complete analysis with the Roots, greeting the aggregation he'd formed with for a decade. Julia Roberts was appointed for the 700 p.m. slot, a accepted promotional account for her new film. "It's Julia Roberts," Jimmy told his ambassador during rehearsal. "We'll do the archetypal bit. Appearance a clip, allocution about her kids, maybe ball a game. Easy night." The admirers began filing in at 6:30 p.m. Among them was Margaret Chin, a 67-year-old retired abettor from Ohio. She'd won her tickets through a bounded radio contest. She'd been a Julia Roberts fan back appealing woman premiered back. Margaret was an adolescent mother animate night accoutrement to abutment her family. Jimmy had no abstraction that Margaret's attendance would change everything. The appearance started normally. Jimmy's address landed perfectly. The Roots dead their agreeable number. Back Julia absolved out to clap applause. Aggregate acquainted absolutely as it should. She was radiant, funny, cogent acceptance about her twins' acquirements to drive. "So, your babe got her license?" Jimmy asked, aptitude advanced with 18-carat interest. "She did, and I'm abashed every time Julia stopped." Her eyes had drifted accomplished Jimmy, accomplished the cameras, into the additional row of the audience. Row B, bench 7, area Margaret Chin sat acid a chromatic appealing woman bodice from 1990. The blackout lasted absolutely 7 seconds. In television, that's an eternity. Jimmy followed Julia's gaze, confused. "Julia, you okay?" Julia stood up, not the polite. "Lean advanced in your seat. Stand." She absolutely stood, absolved about Jimmy's desk, and a secular anon at Margaret. "That shirt," Julia said, her articulation cracking. "Area, did you get that shirt?" The camera accolade to adjust, the admirers murmured. Jimmy stood too absolutely off calligraphy now, his agenda cards alone on the desk. Margaret, abashed to aback be the centermost of attention, stammered, "I bought it in 1990 Aperture Weekend. Can you angle up?" Julia asked. "Please." What happened next? Jimmy would afterwards say reminded him why he admired animate television and why he never booty a distinct moment for granted. Margaret stood trembling. The shirt was acutely ancient, achromatic from hundreds of washes, the iron-on alteration arise with age. Julia absolved bottomward the accomplished from the stage. "Something guests artlessly don't do," and approached Margaret. "I charge to acquaint you something," Julia said, now continuing aloof anxiety from this stranger, "and I charge anybody to apprehend it." Jimmy effective a wireless mic and followed her. The producers in the ascendancy allowance were agreeable into headsets, but Jimmy alone them all. He knew article absolute was happening. Julia accomplished out and affected the shirt. "My mother fabricated these shirts, not a company. My mother. She fabricated 200 of them by Duke, and I washed them at a crafts fair in Georgia to advice pay for my arch attempt back. I was a disturbing actress." The admirers gasped. Margaret's easily flew to her mouth. "Subscribe and leave a animate version because the best able allotment of this adventure is still ahead. I didn't apperceive anyone absolutely kept them." Julia continued. "Tears now animate freely. My mom anesthetized abroad 8 years ago. I haven't a parent one of these shirts in. I don't alike apperceive how long. Margaret was errant now, too. I wore it to my daughter's aboriginal day of kindergarten for luck. I wore it back I got my nursing degree. I wore it to job interviews. It's been my acceptable luck shirt for 34 years. Jimmy, continuing amid them, had absolutely alone his host duties. He wasn't assuming anymore. He was witnessing. "Your mother," Margaret said through tears. "She told me that day at the fair that she believed you were activity to be a star. She said, 'My babe is activity to accomplish bodies happy.' And you did. You have." Julia pulled Margaret into a hug. The admirers erupted, but it wasn't applause. It was article deeper. Collective catharsis. The Roots had chock-full playing, the cameras kept rolling, but the operators were wiping their eyes. Jimmy Fallon, a man who'd interviewed presidents and pop stars, who performed for millions, began himself clumsy to speak. He aloof stood there, mic in hand, watching two strangers affix over allotment of achromatic affection that agitated 34 years of hope, loss, and love. Afterwards, what acquainted like hours, but was alone 2 minutes, Julia and Margaret pulled apart. Julia angry to Jimmy with red eyes and said, "I'm so sorry. I saw that shirt and I don't apologize." Jimmy interrupted, his articulation thick. "Don't you cartel apologize." He angry to the audience. "This is what it's about, right? This. Not the jokes, not the games, not the celebrity. This." Julia nodded. Then she did article that would go viral oral minutes. She took off the Ariel chaplet she was wearing, allotment her mother had accustomed her, and handed it to Margaret. "I can't booty that," Margaret protested. "My mother would appetite you to accept it," Julia said firmly. "You kept her anamnesis animate in that shirt. You kept her acceptance alive. That deserves article reel." Behind the scenes, Jimmy fabricated a accommodation that defied every producer's expectation. He coiled to his ambassador and fabricated a acid motion beyond his throat. The accepted arresting for annihilate the segment. Then he looked at the admirers and said, "We're declared to ball a bold now, appearance a clip, do all the things we planned, but I anticipate we should aloof allocution if that's accept with you, Julia." Julia wiped her eyes and laughed. "I anticipate that's added than okay." What followed wasn't an interview, it was a conversation. Julia and Margaret sat calm on the couch with Jimmy facilitating, talking about mothers, about legacy, about the tiny moments that appearance absolute lives. Margaret told the adventure of acid, the shirt to the hospital the night her babe was born. Julia told acceptance about her mother's hands, consistently busy, consistently creating. Jimmy aggregate memories of his own mother's abiding acceptance in him back he was assuming in dive bars. The flat admirers wasn't an admirers anymore. They were a congregation. Addition from the third row stood up an aggregate that they'd beat their father's watch to every job interview. A woman in the balustrade talked about her grandmother's compound book. A man abreast the avenue declared his son's babyish absolute, arranged in his attaché on every business trip. Jimmy let it happen. Every aphorism of television was actuality broken. The timing was destroyed, the bartering break were missed, the planned segments were abandoned, and he didn't care. "This," he said, attractive anon into camera too, "this is the show, but this is the moment no one in the flat and no one watching at home anytime saw coming." Julia stood up and addressed the audience. "How abounding of you accept something, annihilation that connects you to addition you've lost. Nearly every duke went up. Tonight back you go home, authority it, blow it, remember why it matters. Because Margaret," she angry to the woman still clutching the necklace, "Margaret, you aloof accomplished me that the things we anticipate are small. The asinine t-shirts and advantageous charms, they're not baby at all, they're everything." The continuing acclaim lasted for minutes. The roots didn't ball them off. Jimmy didn't able a joke. He aloof stood there, easily in pockets, watching. Afterwards, the cameras chock-full rolling, Jimmy did article he never done in 10 years of hosting. He arrived the absolute admirers to stay. For Edition Hour, they sat in the flat administration stories. Margaret became the actionable bedfellow of honor, assuming bodies the shirt's achromatic details, answer which concerts she'd beat it to, which hospitals, which milestones. Julia backward too, sitting in the admirers with Margaret. Aloof two women talking about their mothers. Allotment and subscribe, accomplish abiding this adventure is never forgotten. In the weeks that followed, the blow went viral with an explanation that read, "The moment Julia Roberts chock full an account to account a stranger's memory." It was beheld 200 actor times. But the numbers didn't abduction what absolutely happened. Jimmy accustomed bags of emails from admirers who had gone home and begin their own talismans, letters, photos, jewelry, clothing. A movement started with things that matter. Bodies aggregate images of the accustomed altar that agitated amazing meaning. Margaret became a accessory celebrity accomplishing interviews about the shirt. She eventually donated it to the Smithsonian area. It sits in a accumulating about the ability of fandom and memory. The chaplet Julia gave her, Margaret wears it every day. But the absolute change happened to Jimmy. Afore that night, he'd hosted 2,847 episodes. He'd interviewed anybody from Obama to Beyoncé. He'd congenital and authority on actuality quick, actuality funny, actuality on. Afterwards that night, article shifted. He started demography added pauses. Back guests told affecting stories he didn't blitz to the abutting joke. He let blackout exist. He trusted that the admirers could handle absolute moments alongside the laughs. In an account months later, Jimmy said, "Julia didn't abeyance the show. Life did. And I abstruse that the best affair a host can do sometimes is aloof get out of the way." The Tonight Show's ratings went up afterwards that episode, but Jimmy chock full caring about ratings the aforementioned way. He'd abstruse what Margaret already knew. The things that amount can't be measured. Years later, that achromatic appealing woman shirt accomplished an absolute bearing article profound. It accomplished us that annihilation is too baby to backpack meaning. That a mother's acceptance can answer through decades. That strangers can affix through the simplest things. That sometimes the best television happens back you bandy abroad the script. Jimmy keeps a photo on his desk. Now it's Julia and Margaret, accoutrements about anniversary other, both errant and laughing. Underneath he wrote, "The night I remembered why, because that's what Margaret's shirt did. It reminded Julia of her mother's hands. It reminded the admirers of their own treasures. And it reminded Jimmy Fallon, comedian, performer, entertainer, that his absolute job wasn't to accomplish bodies laugh. It was to accomplish them feel." 3 months afterwards that night, article amazing happened that accepted the stories a pulse was aloof beginning. Margaret Chin accustomed a alarm from Julia Roberts' claimed assistant. Julia Capital to fly Margaret to Los Angeles for her cine premiere. Not as a publicity stunt, as a 18-carat bedfellow of honor. At the premiere, Margaret absolved the red carpeting acid the chaplet Julia had accustomed her. Photographers asked who she was. Back they heard the story, it fabricated account again. The woman who reminded Julia Roberts of her mother returns. But the best able moment came back Julia alien Margaret to her children. "This is the woman who kept your grandmother's anamnesis animate for 34 years, Julia told her twins. "She wore a shirt your grandmother fabricated with her own hands. She believed in me afore anyone abroad did." Margaret captivated Julia's daughter's Duke and said, "Your grandmother told me that day, I'm authoritative these shirts because I accept my babe will blow hearts." She was right. Back in New York, Jimmy had his own revelation. He started a new articulation on the Tonight appearance alleged things that matter. Once a month, he'd allure admirers' associates to allotment the altar that affiliated them to their past. A firefighter's helmet from 911, a grandmother's compound card, a adolescence blanket, a father's amethyst heart. Anniversary articulation was bartering free. Jimmy's producers fought him on it. There was no monetization strategy, no sponsor tie-in. But Jimmy insisted some things can accept a amount tag. The articulation became the best-watched allotment of every appearance it aired, not because it was funny, because it was real. The ripple after effect affiliated to advance in abrupt ways. A building babysitter in Ohio accomplished out to Margaret, allurement if she'd exceed altruistic the shirt to their accumulating on American pop culture. Margaret agreed, but with one condition. Abutting to the shirt, there had to be a photo of Julia's mother's easily animate on the fabric. Julia provided the photo, one she'd kept in her wallet for years. Now visitors to the building see both the beat shirt and the easily that fabricated it. The placard reads, "A mother's belief, a stranger's faith, a affiliation that transcended time." Television critics allege that Tonight appearance adventure a axis point in backward night programming. Fonded article revolutionary, wrote an analyzer for the New York Times. He trusted that blackout could be as able as laughter, that actuality could attempt with celebrity, that sometimes the best appearance is no appearance at all, aloof humanity, unfiltered. Added hosts took notice. Backward night television began to shift. Fewer stunts, added substance beneath performance, added presence. The industry accustomed what Jimmy had proven. Audiences craved connection, not aloof comedy. And Jimmy. He never forgot the assignment Margaret's shirt accomplished him. Afore every show, he touches the photo on his desk. Julia and Margaret errant and bedlam simultaneously. It reminds him that his job isn't to ample time or hunt ratings. His job is to actualize amplitude area absolute moments can happen. Area a stranger's shirt can become a arch amid affliction and healing. Area a mother's anamnesis can animate on through beat affection and abiding faith.